is Outnumbered. I'm Kaylee McEnany. Here today, my co-host, Emily Campagno, Julie Banderas, Fox News contributor and syndicated radio host, Leslie Marshall, and in the center virtual seat, Dan Hoffman, Fox News contributor and former CIA station chief and director of the CIA Middle East region. A new NPR PBS Marist poll shows the president's job approval rating has dropped 6 points in a single month to 43%, the lowest number for Biden since he took office. His disapproval rating, not surprisingly, shot up 7 points to 51%. The poll also shows a majority of independents now disapprove of the job the president's doing, with a 10-point drop. And that is bad news for Biden and the Democrats. Independents are a key swing group that Biden won in 2020. A separate ABC News Washington Post poll also showing how the president's job approval rating has taken a substantial hit, plummeting to 44%. That's the second poll. And the new polls should scare Democrats. How the public thinks about President Biden will be the single biggest indicator of how the 2022 midterm elections will turn out. But Leslie, all of these alarm bells have to be a bit worrisome to you. Indeed, it's worrisome to two other members of your party, Doug Schoen, Carly Cooperman, two Democrat pollsters, who wrote this in The Hill, quote, "The recent decline in support for President Biden and his administration likely means that the Democratic Party will lose control of the House and potentially the Senate in 2022, and makes it increasingly likely that Biden will be a one-term president." Leslie.
Well, although Doug and I share a D on our lapel, and I consider him a friend and have a lot of respect for my colleague, I would disagree. And the reason I disagree is Afghanistan is not top of mind for voters, and it certainly won't be as we get farther away from leaving Afghanistan. And hopefully we will have that 100 to 200 Americans who choose not to stay with family members there, but be brought home. When you look at this poll, it's largely about Afghanistan. When you look at these two polls, 71% of Americans feel that Afghanistan was a failure. They are split practically down the middle on how we could have done this. And the blame, as you rightly pointed out, Kaylee, is placed on Biden. Will that translate to the Democrats running in House and Senate seats in November of 22? Here are some other issues, though, that are going to be problematic. And one is going to be coming out of Texas. Yesterday in California, we had more votes going in for Gavin Newsom that the early voting was showing in the state of California with the recall election after SB 8. And I think issues like that are going to be more worrisome. And also, speaking of Afghanistan, overwhelming majority, both Democrats and Republicans, very strongly support Afghan refugees coming to the United States and being helped, and that we can't abandon them. And that is not the messaging for some Republicans that are going to be running in November 2022 in those House and Senate races. So I don't think that these two polls indicate that Democrats will lose control in the slim majority that they have in the House, or that they could break that tie or lose that tie in the Senate. Don't get me wrong, I'm not going to Vegas and saying we're picking up 40 seats or anything like that. But I don't think it's time to get out the razor blades to the wrists for Democrats in November 2022 as of yet.
But Leslie, let me ask you about that, though, because you have a slim majority in the House, 5 seats. These approval ratings are overall approval ratings. We've seen in 2 national polls the numbers sink. When you look at the right, are we going in the right direction? 23% say yes, according to Gallup. Notably, the number of Democrats saying we're going in the right direction has fallen from 63 to 39%. And a new survey out in the Washington Examiner showing in 24 of the 34 states where there are Senate races, Biden's approval is underwater. So you're not concerned. Overall, his approval's tanking.
Today, if the election would be held today, I would be concerned. But as you know, Kaylee, between today and November, it's a lifetime. I know it comes quick, but it is a lifetime. Look, I certainly hope that we're going to see better job numbers by November 2022, that crime will be reduced in certain areas in 2022, and God willing, COVID will be, behind us, and we won't see a lot of fallout from this new Mu variant, in addition to the Delta variant. And also, a lot of blame, quite frankly, for COVID is being blamed on the state level, on governors. We're seeing that in numbers falling for Texas Governor Abbott and Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis.
As the Biden administration tries to push past Afghanistan, it appears as though the mainstream media is going along with the plan. All the major networks have largely avoided discussing the bombshell report detailing a July phone call between President Biden and now exiled Afghan President Ghani. According to excerpts shared by Reuters, President Biden appeared to urge Ghani to play up the, quote, perception of stability in Afghanistan, regardless of what was actually happening on the ground. Ghani later warned the president that Afghans were facing a, quote, full-scale invasion. Yet the president told the American people no one could have predicted how quickly Afghanistan would fall to the Taliban. You would think that would be a pretty big story, worthy of significant coverage. And not only is the liberal media looking the other way, they're actually praising President Biden's actions in Afghanistan. And no doubt about it, there was a cover-up, it seems. Change of perception was the call to the Afghan president from our president. Leslie, the media also seems to be just total blackout on this now that we're a few days past our withdrawal. You have CBS, MSNBC, not a minute of coverage in the evening news broadcast. You have Don Lemon saying, let's move on. And then here's Rob Crilly at the Washington Examiner pointing this out. He put out a tweet spotlighting the front page of today's New York Times with Afghanistan in the small corner of the front page. His tweet saying that this was just 25 words on Afghanistan on the front page of the New York Times. Do you think it's fair for the New York Times and others to move on at a time when we have 1,000+ Americans, green card holders, Afghan allies left behind?
Well, as you know, in the news, it is the latest story that's going to lead in the headlines. And after what happened in Texas with SB 8, that is a bigger story. That is more important not only to voters, but to readers, to viewers, to listeners. It doesn't mean that they should not have mentioned. I do think that they should have mentioned the transcript between the president of the United States and the president of Afghanistan. But I do want to say something, because, Kayla, you remember when, in the former administration, the negotiations were not with the president of Afghanistan. He wasn't in the room. They were with the Taliban. So, I mean, the president of the United States, even though he may have said that, the perception and the knowledge, not just from Americans, from our allies and from the world, was that the Taliban were going to be the new sheriff in town. And that's how come the negotiations were with them and not the Afghan president. And speaking of the Afghan president, he obviously didn't care about messaging, because he already had his ticket to get out of the country and his plan to take tons of money, a lot of cash with him on the way.
But look at what Ed O'Keefe, by the way, is asking, Emily. Ed O'Keefe from CBS. Boy, he's had 2 softballs in the last 7 days. Let's roll the tape.
Was your home in Delaware affected by the storm at all? No, but the state was. What's that? No, but the state was affected. Sure. Brandywine overflowed, and my home, to the best of my knowledge, I haven't been there yet.
How was he? How was his mood? How was he in dealing with all these, with the incoming information? How was he in asking the questions of military commanders, etc.?
Well, I would say that anyone who's watched the president up close, which is most of you, knows that the putting the lives of servicemen and women at risk and those decisions that you have to make as commander-in-chief weigh heavily on him.
I'd like to point out that Dan's insightful analysis at the beginning of this segment to me absolutely underscores that those 13 U.S. service members' deaths there at the Kabul airport were preventable. That blood is on this commander-in-chief's hands, that despite knowing exactly what was going on there, he misrepresented to the American people and then made decisions that had deadly consequences for our U.S. service members. And therefore, Leslie, I respectfully disagree with your comment that it's a bigger story about the bill and the law happening in Texas. I think the American people...
I didn't say... Excuse me. I never said that Texas was a bigger story than Afghanistan. I said Texas, SB 8, was a bigger story than the phone call. There was no allegation of quid pro quo in the phone call. Mitch McConnell said there wasn't going to be an impeachment. And by the way, if you roll the tape, I was against impeaching Donald Trump. I'm actually against impeachment of any president unless there is a possibility of removal, because that's really what the process was set up to do. And you weren't going to have a removal of Trump. You weren't going to have a removal of Bill Clinton. It was possible if we had had the impeachment of Richard Nixon.
Well, it's also to prevent them from ever running in office, to take place in future office. I mean, that's another reason for impeachment as well.
Leslie, thank you for
Emily?
that.
Well, Donald Trump has been impeached twice, and he can certainly run in 2024.
Just to finish what I
Emily.
was saying, Leslie, thank you for that clarification and the distinction. And Leslie, do you agree that there would also need to be probably a tougher stance, a larger commitment to international compliance then by the Democrat Party here?
Oh, yeah, there definitely does need to be. But we, you know, if you want to put America first, you have to look at America first. And Dan, thank you. The sixth for point, you actually great segue to what I was going to say. The sixth assessment by the climatologist came out at the beginning of August. And Sheldon Whitehouse said in Rhode Island, we were warned. We were warned. And people may not like the government talking about this or politics being a part of it, but politics is a part of passing legislation which gets checks written and gets money to the states. And we need that. We need to, I think we would all agree, regardless of our political party, that we need to be better prepared. I think we would all agree, because the facts are there, that our hurricanes are coming more frequently with higher intensity. So are earthquakes. So are wildfires, like right here. Yesterday, I may not have been on today, guys, because of technical problems due to the wildfires. Thank you to the Fox techs and engineers who are great at getting that fixed. But we also have beyond infrastructure, which was bipartisan. If you look at the number they started at, the number they ended with, I think that's going to be the same with this as well. And we have to look beyond not just infrastructure. We have to look at human infrastructure, energy, agriculture, environment. These are all things that play in. So sometimes people don't like the phrase climate change, and they think it's political, and they think it's just a part of a leftist agenda. But the climate is changing. That is a fact, whether we like it or not. And that's not political. That's scientific.
As crime soars in San Francisco, the city is rolling out a plan to pay prospective criminals $300 a month not to shoot anyone. The pilot program, partly funded by taxpayers, kicks off next month. It will provide gift cards to 10 people deemed at high risk of shooting someone or of being shot to act as public safety ambassadors. Participants could also earn an extra $200 if they meet certain benchmarks, like attending parole appointments. Leslie, what is the argument defending this?
Okay. I am so glad that you came to me. Yesterday when I saw this story, I said, oh, I hope they don't have this on Outnumbered tomorrow, because I'm not going to be able to defend this. But because I think it's crazy and it matches the headline. But there is some merit to programs like this. There is great work out there, not just in San Francisco, here in my state of California, incentivizing people with work programs, school programs, sobriety, or trying to get into programs with regard to drug addiction and rehab. But here's my problem with the shooting and the being shot. How do you identify who is going to shoot somebody or who will be shot? And if you do, doesn't law enforcement have to get involved in advance? How do you get a criminal to pledge and trust their pledge? They're a criminal. And then, of course, you know, they're going to probably make more than $300 if they shoot somebody. And how will somebody know? So I don't like this part of the financial incentive, but I do when it comes to work or school or sobriety or drug rehab.
Football fans have seen players display Black Lives Matter and other types of decals on the back of their helmets. And now the NFL will allow players to choose from 6 different social justice phrases to wear on the back of their helmets for the 2021 season. They can choose from the following: Black Lives Matter, End Racism, Stop Hate, It Takes All of Us, Inspire Change, and Say Their Stories. Leslie, here's my question. This is part of a $250 million 10-year commitment by the NFL to, quote, combat systemic racism. But how is systemic racism combated by what is arguably a largely performative endeavor by then of in-field PSAs and helmet decals and the like? What is this actually doing other than satisfying their own box to be checked?
Is that for me? Yeah.
Yes, Leslie.
Know your audience. 67% of NFL players are African American. Nearly 40% of their viewers are African American. So they're appealing to what is happening not only within the community but within our society. Look, I just got to say, Dan, I'm from Boston. Go Pats. Kaylee, Tampa, who? Even you guys like the Pats. You took our Tom Brady from us. But that aside, I won't be angry about it. I don't like politics on the field. I don't like politics at the Emmys, Academy Awards, but that's what it's become. Yeah. We're political in nature. That's what it's become, and I agree with the whole free speech concept on both sides of these issues.
Well, I do love keeping the arguments only to all of the teams that we support. It's probably good that we're remote today, though, because this could be a knockdown, drag-out fight between our teams. All right, guys, more Outnumbered in just a moment.